Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to Between Sermons, where we are continuing the conversation from our Sunday sermon. As always, you don't have to have listened to the sermon in order to get anything out of this podcast, but it can't hurt. So we'll have links in the show notes for you. But today is a super special episode of the podcast because we are in my favorite series of the year called At the Movies. But bigger than that, I am joined today by a lovely couple that for some of you know them as our founding pastors. I know them as mom and dad. Yeah. So we've been doing this for like 2 or 3 months now, and we finally get mom and dad on the show. So welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is awesome. So you guys have been kind of world travelers a little bit more than normal lately. And so your latest trip was where? Where did you just get back from?
Just got back from northern Uganda.
Nigeria.
Nigeria, excuse me. It's the least Christian part of Nigeria. It's the seat of Islam for Nigeria, and so it's interesting. And nothing like my previous visits to Lagos, for instance.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that honestly, for people that don't know, like Nigeria is such a unique place in that like there's almost a dividing line, and if you're in the southern part of that dividing line, it is the most Christian nation you could ever imagine. I mean, largest church buildings, million-person prayer meetings,
mega churches,
just insane levels of just devotion to God.
Yep.
But you cross that border, and it's literally the polar opposite.
Right.
I mean, it's where Christians are persecuted, fear for their lives. Some lose their lives.
Yeah, there was a young girl where we were that had just been stoned to death at her school. It was a young girl because she had posted something on social media, and she was stoned.
Against the prophet.
It was against the prophet, and they stoned her, and nobody has done anything about it. That's just where we were. Just...
Wow.
In northern Nigeria.
How do you process that? You know, when you're with people there.
I have to say, for myself, I feel very, very humbled. I feel like, I don't want to cry. Sorry, I don't want to cry. But I feel like, who am I to talk to these people that are risking their lives? You know, just understanding what they go through. But to be honest, they're just like you and I, and they're not superhuman, and they're just regular and great people to be with. So sometimes while I'm there, I almost forget what it's like for them.
Yeah.
But, they're great.
What kind of encouragement do you offer in a setting like that?
You don't offer any encouragement.
I want to draw you in.
I think you just have to use scripture that is encouraging the promises of God. I did a teaching while I was there that you're not forgotten, which is exactly what Peter said.
Yeah.
God knows what's going on, and so
it's beautiful. Love it. That's really cool.
Yeah, and you build them up because the world that they're living in really does drag them down.
Yeah.
There's so much against them. So you build them up and tell them how valuable they are in God, and have fun with them.
Love it.
It's
awesome. Because they're people.
Yeah, because they're people. I think that's what, in the end of the day, they're just people. Yeah. They're just normal people.
And that's true across the board. Every country we ever visit, you have that sense that, they put on their shoes just like we do.
Yeah, we were just in Turkey, working with teaching the underground Iranian pastors. And that was another time when I'm thinking, what can I tell these people? Because they're going back to their country and they're facing jail and death. But in the end of the day, we just have a good time.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I forget. And
I remember the first time that ever happened with us. It was an Iranian pastor who had spent 5 years in the most notorious prison of Iran.
Wow.
And they told me that afternoon before the service that he was going to be in our service that night. And I nearly panicked. It's like, what could I possibly say to someone that's spent 5 years in prison, lost his family over all of that?
And for the gospel, too. I mean, he's not in prison because he broke
No, exactly. Yeah. And like Chris said, just, You know, he couldn't have been more down to earth, more willing. Invited us over to his apartment for dinner. He cooked dinner for us. You know, it's like, this is so surreal. You know, can't imagine it.
It's amazing. So Turkey, Nigeria. Where are you off to next?
Philippines.
Which is that's just a fun trip. You know?
That's all fun.
Well, actually, shout out to our Filipino friends that are editing this podcast for us. So yeah, you can go shake their hands and say thank you in person in a little bit.
Yeah, just a couple weeks, huh?
Yeah, there's now 36 CLC campuses. Every year we go back, it's more. You know,
Bishop Hurley is he's not quitting.
No,
moving forward. I love it. It's beautiful. All right, so I said we're in my favorite series of the year, At the Movies. This is actually something that you introduced to CLC, but where did you get it from?
You know, it's hard to remember after, I think it's probably been close to 15 years.
Yeah.
I know one of my first conversations was with Mark Batterson.
Okay.
I don't know if he was the first one or not. He may have been. But the statement that he had made to me, they were doing it every year at National Community Church.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'll tell you this, Jerry. He said, those series of messages are always the hardest hitting sermons that we do at our church. And I didn't press him on it, but I thought, I don't get how that can be. You're watching a movie, you know.
Yeah.
How can it be so hard hitting? But all it took was us doing it once or twice, and it's like, I understand, because Hollywood doesn't pull any punches.
Yeah.
And they're willing to address stuff that's real that maybe sometimes, I think, in church we tend to shy away from some of those things. But God at the Movies is one that, you know, it really hits home.
Well, and I think it's actually a perfect. This is a kind of a glimpse into your private lives. But what is it, like every Friday for the last like 20 years, you guys have gone to the movies?
Yes,
like
we do.
I mean, as when I was a kid, it was like it's Mom and Dad's day off. They're going to the movies together.
Yeah.
With some exceptions, when there's just nothing out there they want to watch.
You know, I don't know though. I'm not calling you a liar, but I know you have seen some movies that nobody else saw.
Snakes on a plane?
Yes.
Yeah, that was you alone,
That
because
was
I
me
don't
by
watch
myself.
anything with snakes. That's
Yeah,
just,
but
that's
what I love about it is obviously, you know, you and I both kind of have this whole sci-fi fantasy, like we love that.
yeah.
He is
Not at
not at
all.
all, and so a lot of times there'd be a movie that you're so excited about, and he's just like, "Well, I get some popcorn and a dark room to take a nap in."
That's
right.
But sometimes you'll take me.
Yeah,
So we
we've
can
done a
enjoy
few.
it together, you know. But I go adventure for him, and he goes sci-fi for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so it's not as bad as like if I like chick flicks.
That's true.
I don't make you sit through those.
You dodged a bullet there. or my wife telenovelas. That's, a little bit different.
Yep.
Different worlds.
See, you don't have to do chick flicks, baby. You just have to. He'll say, "What is going on now?"
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of fantastic, because the movie that you preached on Sunday is a sci-fi time travel movie, which is kind of usually like the hardest for a non-sci-fi person, because the time travel aspect, and in the movie there's multiple moments of time travel.
Yeah.
How did you process that?
You have to understand, first of all, that going to the theater for me is just 2 hours of relaxation or whatever, entertainment.
Yeah.
I don't look deep into anything, and unfortunately I do fall asleep a lot in front of those. And there was probably some of that. We couldn't go to it wasn't released in the theater.
This was straight to Netflix.
Yeah, straight to Netflix. So I don't remember if I stayed awake the first time I watched it all the way through or not, but the sci-fi elements of it just didn't mean anything to me. It's okay, you know, there's cool looking planes, and you know, they're talking about stuff that I probably don't even understand, but it's okay. I got past that in order to get to the meat of the story, which was amazing and definitely as hard hitting. I'm convinced that you can't really watch that one without tears. You know, you better have some tissue when you get it.
And laughing.
Yeah, it's got both.
Yeah.
You know, you almost feel schizophrenic, because at one point you're laughing and then you're crying. It's back and forth.
Well, and that's because, you know, the movie stars Ryan Reynolds, he's hilarious, so you're gonna laugh anytime you see him. Honestly, the kid that they cast for the movie, gives Ryan
Fantastic.
Reynolds a run for his money. Like, watch out when that kid's older.
That's for sure.
But so you got the humor there, but it's dealing with relational issues, some daddy issues, abandonment issues. Like, it's dealing with some very heavy subject matter, and you're seeing an adult and a child who are the same person
actually,
but you're seeing, like, hey, this is how he faced it when he was a kid, but he didn't deal with it the right way, and now he's an adult with all these issues. And it's almost like it can be a glimpse into our own lives, where it's like, man, if you could go back in time and tell childhood you know, what to watch out for, or man, it's a powerful movie. It really is.
And the thing about it is that even though you know, it's we're going to call him Big Adam, future Adam, whatever you want to call him. Yeah, we'll just call him the old Adam. The young Adam actually teaches him stuff. And really, you know, I think those were the moments that it was like, oh, he just said something good.
That was one of my favorite lines in the movies, when Ryan looked at the kid and said, "Where did you get so smart?" And the kid says, "Where did you get so dumb?"
Well, one of the things I loved about that was there's a moment when adult Ryan Reynolds, adult Adam, it's in the name of the movie, I should remember his name, adult Adam is misremembering something from the past.
Right.
Because he's remembering it through the lens of his trauma and his pain and his grief. But young Adam was
defending.
He's like, no, that happened like a year ago. I remember it better than you remembered it.
Yeah.
And I remember this thing that you've neglected. Yeah. And to me, it's just such a powerful moment, because it's like, man, how often do we misremember things from the past?
Because of the filter we have, the filter of pain or disappointment.
Yeah.
And but he was right there just a year earlier, so he remembered issues. He remembered things that were true. Yeah. And so it was really great. Yeah. It was a great movie. We laughed, we cried. Yeah. He cried.
I did.
Oh, you're calling the man out.
Yeah, it wasn't just me that cried.
It was just allergies, right? You know,
it was
something in the air.
It was just allergies. Yeah.
This Canadian fires, I think.
Yeah, you know, it affects all of us differently.
Yeah, except we were doing this in Nigeria, baby.
Ooh, ouch. Okay, so I have to ask, how many times did you guys have to watch the movie? Because I think that's something that people sometimes don't know. They're like, oh, they got to watch a movie. That's great. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, we have to watch these things over and over and over again.
Yeah, for sure. It's the most time-intensive sermon prep we ever do. You know, we put in more time than we do for a normal sermon at CLC. I didn't keep track. I would say probably 4 to 5 times.
6 times, baby.
6
you didn't
times?
take track.
Okay.
And we're probably going to watch it again. Just to make sure that we got the right clips. But it's, you know, you're trying to find, okay, what's the message here?
Yeah.
Some movies it's easier than others. This one was easy. It was obviously going to be about relationships, although you could really teach lessons on leadership there. But it was about relationships. So, okay, let's pick out the most relational tidbit, the thing that really we struggle with. Yeah. Because this is not just to enjoy. We enjoy it, but it's not just to enjoy. It's really to help.
That's the struggle with the sermon prep aspect of it, because there's always, in any at the movies sermon that we do, there's always clips that or portions of the movie that we would like to use, but you've only got so many minutes that you can allot to that as part of it, and sometimes it really doesn't have anything to do. That was the case with this. It didn't have anything to do with what our chosen topic was, but it was such it was such a great conversation. It's like, oh, I want to use that.
That's happening to me. So I'm doing the next message, and it's Top Gun Maverick. I have 12 clips. We're only using 7 of them.
Yeah.
So I mean, almost half of what could be used, and that's not even everything from the movie.
Sure.
It's just, you know, but there's a lot that ends up on the cutting room floor, as we say.
Yeah, it was and it was good stuff too. I'm sure Top Gun is the same way. It was really good stuff. It was like, oh, this is really good, but it doesn't necessarily apply to the things that we are trying to bring out. Yeah. So, you know, we'd look at each other, and finally it's like, oh, we're going to have to cut that one.
Yeah. So The Adam Project, only on Netflix, highly recommended by our founding pastors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Although, you know, with the caveat, it is PG-13, because of language.
Yep.
And the little kid, the 12-year-old,
He's as guilty as anybody else.
He's the one that they had to guard against because he'd had a mouth on him. So So if you're inclined to take your family or sit down at home and watch it, just know that ahead of time. Whether your kids could handle it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was great. He was so many times we said, can we put that in, or is that that's I don't think that'll work.
Yeah, that's probably not appropriate.
It's not appropriate. Okay, moving on.
Well, you guys did grab a lot from the movie to teach on regarding relationships and how to find healing from the past and all that. You actually walked away with 7 points.
Yeah.
We don't have time for this podcast to rehash all 7 of your points. Sure. And so I would love to just kind of give each of you a chance to kind of talk about the big one for you. Like if you were like, man, of these 7, there's one that maybe it's even the one that's been the biggest struggle for you. It's the one that you're like, this is the one that I've had to overcome repeatedly in my life, or I'm still working on this one, or whatever that may be. But of the 7, what's your go-to? Whoever wants to start.
I think it was one of the earliest, maybe the second or third point that we used. We called it "be present," and I've preached that from the pulpit. I hate the fact that sometimes when you're preaching, you're addressing stuff that you need to hear yourself. Yeah. But
I tell people all the time. Sometimes I'm up on the stage, I'm just talking to myself. You're just listening to me talk.
Yeah. And that's definitely been the case there. I think just. As we said, from the movie, that you just have to be there. You don't have to be perfect. But I've probably struggled with that through the years, particularly when you kids were smaller and everybody was at home. I was going to change the world. I was going to grow a church, and family was kind of secondary. It's also one of my greatest regrets in life was that aspect of it. And every time I get around a young minister couple these days, that's what's always on the tip of my tongue is, guys, you got to keep family first. So
and as your son, like I appreciate that greatly, because we've talked about this openly, that
sure.
There were times when it was especially in those early days, we lived in the farmhouse on church property, right? So like it's now our youth parking lot is where our home was. So I remember times when I would come home from school. You were at work, which is normal, but then Mom would be setting the table for dinner. You'd come in the door, sit down at the table, and have dinner with us. And as soon as you would lick the plate clean, you were back out the door, heading over to the church. And so it just kind of, I think for early on, that was kind of childhood. Like it was just dad was at the church.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful for the fact that in the birth order, I'm the baby. I'm the youngest, and you started to recognize the damage when I was still young enough to benefit from your, I guess, repentance of that.
Yeah.
And so I still remember being able to say, no, I had more time with Dad than my brother and sister. Yeah.
It's one of the points in the message too, is a father wound. That it's real. Yeah. The absent father syndrome is how psychiatrists refer to it, but it's very real. And we were doing. You may recall we were having more men show up for this than anything we've ever done. But we did men's fraternity is what it's called. And I would come home. It was always on Saturday mornings, and I would come home and tell her things that I said, I just learned this today about my dad and how I'm still walking that out or whatever. And she'd say, "You're just now figuring that out."
I mean, she does have a counseling background. Yeah. She's got the leg up there.
Yeah, but it was every week. It was like I was getting something out of it, and then part of that was dealing with your sons at various milestones in their life, and you happened to be at one of those, kind of your college graduation or whatever. And so I followed their instructions from men's fraternity as to how to make that a meaningful and special time. I cried all the way through it. I don't think you knew what was going on, So I don't know how well it worked, but
well, it worked extremely well. If you go down to my office after we're done recording the podcast, the book that you gave me, the men's fraternity kind of, this is your Welcome to Manhood book. It's sitting on my shelf.
Okay.
It's down there. It made an impact.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
So you talked about some of your own father wounds. How have you processed through that? Obviously, men's fraternity was eye-opening for you, but
It was.
how did you go about forgiving him, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, it was different because he was already deceased by
Yeah.
the time I was watching that. I think one of the things they recommended and what I did in that case was write a letter.
Okay.
And I didn't struggle. I had issues with the absent father thing. He was emotionally absent.
Yeah.
Need to mention that my dad was always in the house with us, but emotionally absent. But now I'm losing my train of thought.
So you
okay.
wrote this letter.
Yeah, but I know what I was going to say is I didn't really struggle with anger or bitterness from him. I knew he was doing probably the best that he could under the circumstances. My dad came out of abject poverty, had I think maybe an 8th grade education, and he basically pulled himself up by his bootstraps, as the expression goes, to make something of himself or for our family. And I was the baby of our family, so I benefited from that. I'm sure my older siblings would have said he wasn't there for us. But I think that was, I didn't have to struggle as much as I could have because I just recognized he was doing out of his circumstances. He was doing the best that could be expected.
It's a powerful thing when you recognize like the same grace that you would want for yourself is the same grace that you offer to somebody else.
Yeah, it's true.
It's beautiful.
Or the same grace that you offer someone else, you need to offer yourself.
See, that's ooh.
Yeah, and that's going on to the
She
point
goes
that
for the 5th rib. Just,
it
digging
goes
right in
to
there.
the point that I want to talk about, and that is dealing with regrets.
Okay.
Because we all have regrets, but again, we're talking about when we were pastoring, we had no example of how do you pastor and take care of your family. And we really didn't even know how to do it. We really did. Now there's books galore and podcasts galore, and everybody's talking about it. But back when we were going through it, we didn't know how. So we did the best we could. But I recognized, at this point, again, counseling background, all the different things that I had done wrong, and the regrets that I have. And that's one of the points in the movie with Adam, Reynolds' character. He recognized how he treated his mom during those growing up years because he missed his dad, because his dad was absent mentally, emotionally, and then he died. He took it all out on his mom with his smart mouth.
Yeah.
And so as an adult, he's looking back 30 years and he has these regrets on how he treated his mom.
He says something in the movie about like I still get sick to my stomach when I think about how I treated her.
Yeah, I mean it was really deep down regrets for how he treated his mother. So that's one of the points we bring out is dealing with regrets, and the thing that kind of helps with dealing with regrets is kind of almost to treat it like a sin. That you acknowledge it. I did this wrong.
Yep.
It's not like it's a sin, but you did it wrong. And you confess it to God, and you ask God to help you with it. And then if you can, you apologize or you make amends.
Mm-hmm.
But the last point, the most important point, I think, is then you give yourself grace.
Yeah.
You forgive yourself. Because you can it's easier to forgive other people than it is yourself.
No doubt.
And again, with the regrets, the thing is the thoughts keep popping up.
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, I've forgiven myself. It's over. I'm good. Let's go. It's like, tomorrow morning you're going to wake up with this thought, oh, I shouldn't have done it. So it's almost I don't want to call it an ongoing battle because it's, regrets is not that. It's not a battle. It's just a constant process, I think.
And it's something that a lot of people will pick back up.
Yeah.
I've been kind of trying to work through something with a friend that he's got some regrets for some things that he's done. And it's like he finds a place of healing and he forgives himself. But if he has a stumble or he has a moment of weakness and he starts going back and he picks up that regret so quickly. And it's like, man, when you put it down, don't pick it back up.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's almost a constant, I didn't want to say battle, but it is a constant process. It's something you can't really let your guard down. Because I will be waking up out of sleep and catch myself thinking, I'm really a terrible, It's like I wasn't even, hey, I'm not even fully awake. Come on. This is the thoughts that are coming. But so it's a constant process that you can't just put to the side. You can't, like, you repent of sin, it's gone, it's forever, it's forgivable, all this stuff. Regrets is a little bit more difficult to deal with. So I think that part of the sermon, it kind of hit me because I'm going to be coming from a personal place as well. But I think it'll help us all. I think understanding their regrets is probably the most hardest thing you have to deal with. It sounds like such a simple thing, right? It sounds so easy. It sounds so little regrets, but actually it's tough.
Well, CLCers are going to get a double dose of that one because Top Gun is, we're just talking about that. Like that's like 99% of what we're going to talk about. So, if you don't get it the first time around, we'll get you a second time.
It seems like that happens every year, that there's a theme that crosses over from movie to movie. Maybe not all 4 or 5 of them, but 2 or 3 at least, it seems like.
And obviously we didn't know what you were pulling out of Top Gun because we were in Nigeria.
You were in a different country.
We were in a different country, and this is we're pulling it all together, and then we showed it.
Yeah, I presented my notes to the team while you guys were in Nigeria, and then you got back and you sent me your notes, and I pulled them up, and I went, oh.
Okay, then.
All righty, then.
We're doing the same thing. We are opposite sides of the planet, but, I think that's part Holy Spirit. I really do believe that's part of the process that God knows. There's some things that first time through is not going to...
People need to hear it twice.
It's not going to, because you start to get it, but to actually live it out needs another... hit in the head.
One of the passages that I'm using is from Psalms where David talks about how our sins are separated from us as far as the east is from the west. And I love that it's David that says that. Like,
because he had
David
really
messed up
big time.
And if you're looking at somebody that needs to let go of regrets or mistakes, I mean, he had to have woken up every morning feeling those regrets, and he had to actively remind himself, they're as far as the east is from the west, and that's true for all of us. And
so many different ways with David too. I was reading again this week where Joab wanted him to forgive Absalom and let him come back, and he said, okay, he can come back to the country, but he can't see my face. What's up with that? I mean, that's no way. That's not forgiveness. And then later we read about Adonijah, I think it was, or one of his sons anyway. And the Bible said that David never one time asked him, "Why are you doing that?" Never brought any correction or discipline into his life. So he didn't just sin with Bathsheba. He was a lousy father.
He was absolutely. Yeah, there is no sugarcoating it. And even like with so many other mistakes in his life, you have redemption moments. You don't ever get redemptive. David as a father.
No,
it's just right to the end. It's like, oh boy.
Yeah, because he never corrected it.
Yeah.
He was a man after God's own heart. Absolutely. He knew how to worship. Absolutely. He was a great leader. He was courageous. He was all these things. But he was lousy at relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. But I love what he says. It's separated from the east as far as the east is from the west. And I think too often we, in our regrets, try and bring those east and west together.
Yeah.
And it's like just let God do what God does. And so like one of the big points that I'll be making next week is, so spoilers, it is just this idea that you can forgive yourself because God can forgive you. And if God, this perfect being, superior in every way, if he can look at your mistakes and say it's okay, then who are we to say, no, it's not?
Yeah. Right. But we do that.
All the time.
Yeah. That's what makes it. That's what makes this a very important message while we're doing it 2 movies in a row.
There you go. That's awesome. All right, we're going to kind of wrap things up, but your final point in the message was to not carry things around anymore. But how do you do that? When you've got regrets, when you've got pain, when you've got absent father, when you've got, whatever, mother issues, father, whatever the thing is, what do you do to actually let that go?
I'm not deep, and she'll probably have a better answer than I will. But to me, I think that was the highlight of the acting. First of all, the father is just lavish with, I love you, you're my son, and I love you, and I love you. He's just really pouring it on. And Ryan Reynolds was unbelievable in that. I mean, the nuances that he came up with just to, that he was uncomfortable. You could turn the sound off and watch that, and he is not comfortable with what's happening now, And his dad wouldn't take no for an answer, and finally grabbed him in a bear hug, and that's when you see Ryan break, And so to me, in fact, I thought maybe we should change that and not say, how does it end? Don't carry this around anymore. I really kicked around the idea of calling it receive the Father's love. And to me, that's my simple answer. If you'll just receive, and the Father is sure going all the way to demonstrate that love to you. Yeah. So if you just receive His love, then you won't carry it around anymore, and that's what I'm expecting.
You said you weren't deep, but that was powerful. That was beautiful.
Yeah, because I think that's the power that helps you to do all the steps. Because the sermon really talks about, this forgiveness and forgiving yourself and making amends. And it just we talk about all those things. But at the end, the only thing that really powers all those steps is Father's love. Because otherwise they're just human efforts. And a lot of times it's not enough. Our human efforts aren't enough. But when it's powered by the Father's love and you really get it. And I think, I'm just going to say this, I think sometimes that's harder to do than it is. I remember one time you were just a baby. Oh, so that was a while ago. You were just a baby, and we had this guest preacher who was a prophet, and he was ministering, and all of a sudden, I think it was in Ponderosa Steakhouse.
Wow! Yeah.
Yeah. So this is
right
really
up,
a God
up
moment.
the road on Tinley, like right off Oak Park Avenue, right? Was that where Ponderosa was?
Actually, it was.
This was in Dexter.
This was in Dexter. So you were
Okay.
just baby.
Yeah, this is before that. But we used to go to Ponderosa here too.
I know that was because you didn't have any money, so that's why we did it.
Beautiful. That's my
But,
childhood. You're talking about.
But it's so let's just think about the setting.
Yeah.
Obviously Ponderosa Steakhouse is not in a church service or in the prayer room or whatever. But we're sitting there, and he had said something, and all of a sudden, I'm sensing that God loves me, and Lloyd Bustard, who it was, he looked at me and says, "Isn't the love of the Father wonderful?" And it wiped me out. I'm sitting Ponderosa, sobbing, snotting.
It was almost like he was reading your mind.
He was. Yeah. Well, God would give him more, obviously, but
it's
it was
the danger of having dinner with a prophet.
With a prophet, you're talking about cars, and all of a sudden this happens, But it was the first time in my life I had given my life to the Lord when I was 7 years old, baptized when I was 8. I served God my whole life. I never walked away. But it wasn't until my third child was a baby, pastored, been a missionary, everything, all of that. It wasn't until that moment. Now I'm going to cry again. It was that moment that I actually received God's love.
It's beautiful.
And so, it's not something that's necessarily easy, but when you do, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's. I can't think of a better way to close. That was powerful. It's awesome. Well, that's it for our show today. Thank you so much for hanging out, Mom and Dad, founding pastors, missionaries extraordinaire.
Well, I don't know about the extraordinary part,
I
but
mean,
we are traveling a
Turkey,
lot.
Nigeria, Philippines, all in the last just few
Israel,
weeks.
yeah.
Israel was right before that too.
Yeah,
Man, you guys are
yeah.
just slow down a little bit. And then you got a Senegal trip coming up too, I think.
Yeah, I'm not going on that one.
The big project that CLC has tackled.
Yeah, we're gonna
We're
have some
still in the-
updates on that soon.
We're
I
still in
hope.
the planning stage, yep.
Very cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for hanging out with us
Oh,
today.
thank
on
you
Between
for
Sermons.
asking us.
Yeah. You have open invitation anytime you want to come hang out.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. This is uncomfortable.
Awesome. And on that note, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Between Sermons. Hope to see you again next week.